Today we are discussing when is it too soon to have sex with someone new? With the rise of hookup apps, we've seen a rise in the question around when you should start having sex with somebody. So if you found yourself asking, is it too soon to have sex with this person if I really do want to develop a relationship with them? Or is it too soon even if I don't care about developing a relationship with them just because, you might be worried about stigma around body count, or maybe some concerns around safety? We're going to cover these various topics today.
Welcome to the Pleasure Program. My name is Holly.
I'm Victoria.
We are two licensed therapists specializing in sex therapy, here to share our knowledge and answer your questions about all things related to a healthy and pleasurable sex life. This video is a Pleasure Program quickie where we are covering a topic in sex education relatively quickly.
First, let's talk about things to consider about how soon you should be having sex with someone when you don't actually care about pursuing a relationship. You're just interested in having some intimacy.
The first thing to consider here would be safety, and specifically physical safety. Do you feel safe with this person? Have you discussed safe sex, boundaries, STDs? Protection against an unwanted pregnancy is also something to discuss and consider prior to having sex with somebody. Are you positive this is consensual? Is alcohol involved here? Any substances involved? Are you positive this person is, within their right mind to make sound decisions and understand what they're about to engage in? I have to say, and maybe this goes without saying, but we might get some younger viewers interested in this topic. There are laws here too. Like, we've got physical safety, emotional safety, but are you being legally safe as well? Every state, if you're in the United States, has an age of consent. There's a minimum age requirement for the law to consider you capable and old enough, developed enough to make a decision to have sex. So, that can be from 13 to 16. There might even be some older states where you need to be older. So there's a reason why we have laws in place. It is to protect the vulnerable, right? And if you are not mature enough, you're not developed enough to really comprehend everything we're talking about here and the nuance of all of this, if you think about it, you can't even get a credit card until you're 18. You can't drive a car until you're 16. These are really big, responsibilities. And there's some major consequences that could come of your decision to have sex with someone. Those are all variables to consider before deciding to have sex with someone.
Physical safety is so important, and then also emotional safety. Even if you don't have an established relationship with somebody, it's good to ask yourself some questions like, do you care if they ghost you? Do you care if you have sex with this person tonight and then tomorrow you never talk to them ever again? Because that's a possibility. It happens all the time for people. Mm-hmm. Do you think sex might actually prompt some feelings for you that you don't currently have? And then do you feel okay if they're not reciprocated at that point, right? Is that something that you might be vulnerable to, developing feelings? There's a lot of hormones with sex and oxytocin, and sometimes we can feel bonded to people after sex when you didn't feel bonded to them before. So it's something to consider, especially consider if you have a pattern of that and if you're risking being emotionally hurt. If you're having sex before you feel like you might be emotionally ready or before you feel an emotional connection, it could feel very vulnerable. And that might be scary, or it might prompt sometimes unwanted behaviors for people. If you're suddenly feeling very vulnerable, you might start trying to pursue that person and try to prevent being abandoned or ghosted or something like that. Mm-hmm. And that doesn't feel good. If that might be a tendency for you, if you've ever talked about attachment style with your therapist and you have an anxious attachment style or something like that, then maybe having a one-night stand isn't for you. And it's something to explore beforehand.
Those are really great points. I think too, do you feel like you know this person at least well enough that they will respect your boundaries, both physically and emotionally? Do you feel like you could withdraw consent or not consent to a specific sexual act and it will be fine, and that won't cause any harm or discomfort? So makes a lot of sense that there's got to be at least some kind of basic level of comfortability, trust, respect there.
In terms of talking about consent, something that I have been hearing a lot online and from people that are engaging in hookups is for some reason, casual one-night stand hookups are becoming more and more aggressive, it seems, where gentlemen are thinking that women want to be slapped, like in the face or on the body. And this takes some women by surprise, and they don't appreciate it. They don't like it. It scares them. And so I know it may not sound sexy to be like, yeah, I want to have a one-night stand, but let's talk about boundaries first. Okay, well, think about some things that you might not be okay with. And, that other person doesn't know. And then if it happens, how's that going to feel, honestly, right? So,
yeah. Pretty jarring, pretty unsettling if that happens unexpectedly. Do we need to bring up prior to having sex with someone for the first time, please don't slap me? Like, I think also if you, I think also if you have a kink interest or, a sub or dom type of dynamic or enjoy something more aggressive, it's on you to like bring that up. I don't think that assumptions should be made. If we were to assume we need to let somebody know, I don't like all of these things. There's so many behaviors that come into play when you're having, with sex. There's just one of the reasons why we have this YouTube channel is we cover so many variations and interests, and there's so many ways to have sex with somebody. If you know that you have a sexual desire that maybe is not falling within a very common or normative idea of sex, and you don't know this person super well and you haven't had in-depth discussions, like, it's kind of on you to bring that up, I think.
I agree. I think it's on them, and I think it's not happening. I think it's great that people are engaging in kinks and enjoying kinks. What I think is problematic is that people are engaging in kinks without following, honestly, the kink community's like guidelines of how we actually do that, right? It's like we have a whole episode on kink, and you should check that out. But a huge thing is talking about consent before engaging in acts. And unfortunately, people are engaging in the kinks without consent first. So I think there's problematic.
Right, and there's a lot of people that develop an interest in a kink without being in the community and seeking guidance and connection around that. And sometimes that comes from exposure to pornography, where some of these behaviors are really like normalized, or there isn't a representation of having a conversation about it prior to. I mean, like you just said, it's not the sexiest thing in the world to have these conversations. I think you can make them as sexy as possible, but ultimately it's about safety, right? Physical and emotional safety. And it's a pretty big factor in determining whether you're ready to have sex with somebody. How would you know if somebody is showing signs that they are trustworthy, respectful? Let me say this. I think it can be hard to identify if there's enough trust and respect to feel safe physically and emotionally with someone with a one-night stand if you have no history with this person, right? Let's say you have you need to have some context. How else could you know? You wouldn't know. You would just, maybe based on a little bit of text message communication, or if you have a date at least, or a conversation prior to, you might be able to make some assessments there. But I think you need some context to be able to feel like, oh, this person seems relatively trustworthy or respectful and mindful of boundaries, right? So, but what that could look like would be, how are they treating you in conversation? Are they asking you how you're feeling? Are they asking you what you're comfortable or not comfortable with? Are they actually demonstrating that behavior towards other people? If you're, let's say you're at a restaurant and having a meal, are they kind and respectful towards the waitstaff? And, there's qualities and characteristics about an individual, and you can pick up on this in other areas that you then could maybe make a sound assessment, that they're going to treat you that way in the bedroom.
Yeah, for sure. And I think even having a conversation about the bedroom and about sex can really help you. I know, again, sometimes people feel like that takes away the spontaneity or it being sexy, but I really could tell you whether or not this person is trustworthy. If you're bringing up sex and boundaries and they're dismissive, or they laugh, or they avoid the topic of conversation, maybe they're not the safest person to engage with yet.
Right. You haven't, or at least gotten to a place where you are able to talk about, sex, because a lot of people have a hard time talking about sex. They could be really, very
Right.
respectful and trustworthy, but if you can't get enough information to feel comfortable, then it might be worth it to give it a little bit more time.
Let's say, regardless of how long you've been in this dynamic, you could have just started talking to this person or a few weeks, and you're feeling like you might want a relationship with them. And so you're worried maybe having sex too soon would ruin it, or waiting too long to have sex would ruin it. So like the question really is like, does delaying sex create an association here where you can have a better relationship, or does having sex actually facilitate bonding and developing of intimacy? So what do we do?
This is a bit of I want to say old wives' tale, and I don't know that that's the right terminology here, but right, I think it's a belief that's been around quite a while that if you wait to have sex, you're going to increase your chances of having a more stronger bond, long-term partnership. That partner is not going to perceive you as loose and not like wife material. I think there's a lot of gender that comes into play with this belief, right?
100%.
We're talking about heterosexual couples here. We're talking about perceptions of men and women. And a woman is not wife material if she's just sleeping with just about anybody, right? So there's just a lot of cultural, I think, beliefs wrapped up into this. But
For sure.
What does the research say? Okay, research is mixed here. And it's not very good, unfortunately, and pretty old. Like the research that does exist on delaying sex and is there an association with a higher level of relationship satisfaction, it's like 10 plus years old, right? So there's some research that does indicate that if you delay sex, there is an association with a higher level of satisfaction in the relationship, but only for the woman. Interesting. We could theorize, right? Like maybe for a woman, she feels, I did it. I did my, soon to be wifely duties of being this, staying pure for as long as possible. And I don't just give my body to just anybody, only you, my one and only, right? There's probably maybe some confirmation bias for that woman to feel like this is the real thing, maybe. Or maybe the man is treating her in a way that would also confirm that. So I don't know, speculating here. Well, I love this next one. So there is a research study that did find that delaying sex all the way up until waiting until marriage did confirm that there were higher levels of stability and satisfaction in the long-term relationship here. However, you have to consider the source, right? This research was funded by the Church of Jesus Christ. Wait, what is it?
It's the Church of Jesus Christ.
Funded by Jesus Christ himself. Oh man, the religious people are going to come for us. Funded by the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. So, sometimes who's funding these research, they're looking for an answer, and there's a specific answer they want. And there's a lot of controversy over who's funding different various research studies, and can we really take it at face value? I don't know. But hey, there's the argument that, if you're saving yourself till marriage, you have really nothing else to compare it to. It's this new experience with this person. It's something that only the two of you have experienced together, and potentially just that dynamic alone could increase some satisfaction. It's possible. Okay, and another separate study found that delaying sex for 2 months or more did find higher levels of relationship satisfaction. So there's a few here that might indicate delaying is not a terrible idea. Outside of this idea of the timeline of when you have sex with someone, another research study found that saying I love you before engaging in sex with a partner did demonstrate an association with higher levels of the quality of your relationship immediately and in the long term. Interestingly enough, there are some mental health professionals that strongly advise their clients to wait until what they would perceive to be the honeymoon phase of a relationship ends, when hormone levels are high and intense, and the level of attraction and bond is more stable, and perhaps like an indicator of what would last the test of time before having sex with somebody. Interesting. Also, sounds a little boring. But
it is interesting. And like you said, the research is really mixed, right? We have a lot of research here that's saying, oh, that you should wait up until marriage, essentially, or I love you. But then there are also arguments for not waiting so long. Other people argue that waiting long is too late, as sexual desire can drop after that honeymoon or beginning phase, which would mean that you would lose the sexual tension, and then you're risking a platonic friendship territory. So others are arguing against those vocal professionals, saying, if you wait, that's going to be boring in friendship, exactly like you just kind of indicated yourself. And at that point, you may not be sexually compatible, and you may be wasting your time. Research found that it's possible to have a fulfilling and lasting relationship after a one-night stand. Research shows that like 27% of one-night stands end in a fulfilling relationship.
wow.
Yeah, so then it's like, why not test the waters first, is one argument, right? If like a quarter of these can really end up with something long-lasting.
Very interesting. I wouldn't have expected that. Not that 27% is high in general, but that it would be that high.
Right. And I think that probably comes from like our messaging and the stigma around having sex too soon, like a one night stand, then you're moving on kind of thing. Right. So it's not really a one night stand, I guess, but
It
I guess
doesn't end up being
intended one night stand. Right. And then researchers have also looked at those in a steady relationship with a mixture of people, from those who waited to have sex for a few weeks to those who had sex before going on the first date and those who had sex on the first date. And they found very minimal difference in satisfaction. They only found minimal difference in satisfaction. They found that those who had sex earlier were tending to be slightly less satisfied. And there were some theories around that, like, well, okay, if they had sex earlier, well, then they've been in this kind of sexual relationship and dynamic for a long time. So it may not actually have anything to do with having sex earlier, but more so to do with how long they've been having sex, because as we've talked about, long-term couples can struggle with their sexual dynamic after a certain period of time and get into this kind of maybe friendship roommate phase that we need to like bring the spark back. And so we have a video on keeping the spark alive. If you're like, oh, that's us, we've had sex for 20 years, but we're really hitting that stagnant point right now. Clearly there's mixed thoughts here. There's research on both sides, there's professionals on both sides. So what should you do?
Honestly, there's really no right answer here, right? I think it's a case by case and an individual basis. You have to consider all the variables we've discussed in the video and search within yourself, consider the person and maybe where they're at and what they're demonstrating as to whether or not you feel ready to have sex with this person. And the number one priority is safety, right? First and foremost, physical safety, emotional safety, your own health, right, is potentially at risk here. So start there. Beyond safety, consider your own individual desires, communication around sex, and what boundaries are important for you and your partner before making that decision to go ahead and have sex with them. And be in tune with what makes the most sense for you.
So if you have a question about how soon is too soon to have sex, or how long is too long, please drop a comment below.
Let us know, what's the longest you waited to have sex with a partner? Or maybe the soonest, did you, in your experience, were there pros and cons there? If you feel comfortable sharing, share your experience. We'll see you in the next Pleasure Program Quickie.